It's been a year since Kenya hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where African leaders called for an urgent action by developed countries to reduce carbon emissions. And this was expected because Africa is significantly vulnerable to the impacts of climate crisis. As a matter of fact, Africa pollutes the least but suffers the most.
Yes, we haven't contributed a great deal to greenhouse gases, and yes, it's an imminent threat. Though unfortunately, the polluters continue to. What I think about that is that you have issues like we have Paris, where the world came together to say, let's get serious. We can't go over 2 degrees. It's not a binding agreement, which is unfortunate. So what happens is we as a continent cannot rely. COVID taught us this. We cannot rely on the world to save us. We have to save ourselves. And therefore, you can talk about the African Union Commission. You can talk about various other forums where we sit as Africans to talk about our issues, to say, how can we mitigate the risks? Because unfortunately, money is on the table, and human beings are peculiar when there's money and rents and rent seeking involved. Even if it makes sense to address climate change, you might find that it's more profitable to continue polluting.
So what do we need to drive and finance the transformation needed to address climate change crisis?
How do we come together is basically to say we need to have forums where we discuss things, and we as a continent need to address it ourselves. So be it the crops we're planting, be it the infrastructure we're building, be the contracts we're actually getting into, to ensure that okay, we can't stop China, we can't stop America, we can't stop the major polluters from doing what they want to do, because that's their prerogative. But we can definitely make sure we're at least in a better place to prepare, at least we're better prepared.
What about climate financing?
Climate financing is attractive. It's a new vehicle. It's just like carbon and carbon sequestering. It takes on what it is, it gives people with capital the opportunity to redeploy their capital in more dynamic ways, to maybe replicate, reproduce. However, it's also something where you can argue, are we benefiting from climate financing? I think severally I've heard about loss and damage. Severally we've gone to COP, we've talked, hard things have been said to say that we need to have this shortfall, we need it to be plugged by the countries that are the polluters, as you just mentioned. That the polluters should pay. That we need to have this money so we can mitigate, hence all that policy, to say, so we can actually mitigate what's going to happen in the future, because it is going to happen. Now, the issue is, with climate financing, is one, where do you get in? Do you have the resources? Are you sophisticated enough? Has a vote already passed? And then when it comes to climate financing, do local governments, the continent, do we also invest in climate financing? And if we do, is it actually in a meaningful way to say that you're actually addressing? Where I find that maybe for us, the key thing, because we are in spaces where we can say, even as Kenyans, we can say that our government says there's no money, to say that maybe what we need to do is have better policy to invite financing and not swaps, or to say that if you have a shamba with 100 trees, I'll come by and I'll offset somewhere else, because that doesn't, in a larger scheme of things, that financing is only taking care of, shall I say, the person who's paying, so they continue polluting. So it doesn't actually get rid of the problem. But climate financing, I could say in a nutshell, it's exciting, it can be impactful. I fear that it isn't doing the work that many countries, especially if you think about countries that are literally facing existential crisis. If we were Kenya and we were a small island like Seychelles, and we were saying, this is actually our homes, in a generation, it's gone. And I think in those kind of cases, climate financing could be impactful, but I don't think it's doing the work it's meant to do at this moment.
Supporting mitigation and adaptation actions that will address climate change. And that's what climate financing is all about. So it will be very interesting to see how this issue will be tackled during this year's 29th session of Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is Cop29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, come 11th November. All in solidarity for a green world.